Welcome to Tennessee's at-home learning series for math. Today's lesson is for all our 7th graders out there, though all children are welcome to join in. Today's lesson is the 17th in our series. My name is Kayla Anderson, and I'm an 8th grade math teacher at Rocky Fork Middle School in the Rutherford County School System. I'm so excited to be your teacher for this lesson. Welcome to my virtual classroom. If you haven't seen any of our previous lessons, you can find them online at www.tn.gov/education. That's also where you can find the optional student packet with materials that accompany this lesson. Before we begin, to participate fully in today's lesson, you will need paper, pencil, a surface to write on, and you may need a calculator. The one on your phone is fine. If you haven't seen any of our previous lessons, you're welcome to tune in, but you may want to go back and watch our other lessons first, since we'll be discussing material that we've talked about previously. Okay, let's begin. In the previous lesson, we discussed circumference. Recall that we defined circumference as the distance around the outside of the circle. The diameter is the distance through the center, and the radius is the distance from the center of the circle to the outside of the circle. Also remember that the radius is half of the diameter, or that one diameter is equal to 2 radii. We also have two formulas that we can use to find the circumference. The first formula is C equals pi d, where d is the diameter. The other one is C equals 2 pi r, where r is the radius. Today we are going to discuss the area of a circle. Do you remember finding area of other shapes? What is area? Well, we talk about area of two-dimensional shapes. The area is the measure of the space that the shape occupies, or it is the measure of the surface of the shape. Today we will focus on finding the area of a circle. You may want to write this down on your paper. The formula for the area of a circle is A equals pi times the radius squared. Remember that r squared means radius squared, which means to multiply the radius by itself. Okay, let's look at a problem. Rob is painting a large picture of the moon on his wall. The picture has a radius of 4 feet. He knows that a pint of paint will cover about 50 square feet. Rob wants to determine if a pint of paint will be enough for the job. What do we know from the problem? Well, we know that a picture of the moon is a circle. We know the radius of the circle is 4 feet. We know a pint of paint covers 50 square feet. So, picture of the moon is a circle, has a radius of 4 feet, and a pint of paint will cover about 50 square feet. Well, what is measured in square feet? Right, it's area. We need to find the area of the picture to determine if 50 square feet, which is approximately what a pint of paint will cover, is going to be enough. Sometimes it helps to draw a picture of the problem. So go ahead and draw a circle. Let's label what we know. We know that the radius of the circle is 4 feet. And remember that we're trying to find the area, and we discussed previously that area is all of this inside of the circle. It's how much space the circle takes up. So the formula for the area of a circle is A equals pi r squared, or area equals pi times the radius squared. Well, because we're trying to find area, we'll leave A. Still have pi. And we know that r stands for radius and that the radius of this circle is 4. So we can substitute 4 in place of r. Before we go any further, remember that 4 squared is 4 times 4, which is 16. So simplifying a little bit, we've got area equals pi times 16. Put that in parentheses there. Well, let's use 3 and 1400ths as an approximation for pi. So pi is approximately 3 and 1400ths. And we've got times 16. Okay, so what's our last step here to find the area? Right, we're going to multiply those two numbers together. If you have your calculator, you can go ahead and do that now. Multiplying 3 and 1400ths times 16, you should get 50 and 2400ths. So the area of the picture is about 50 and 2400ths square feet. So will Rob have enough paint if he buys a pint? We'll go back to the problem and remember that a pint of paint will cover about 50 square feet. And his large picture of the moon that he's painting is about 50 and 2400ths square feet. So is a pint going to be enough? It's not. He will need to buy more than a pint since a pint only covers 50 square feet. All right, let's think about another problem. A circular clock face has a diameter of 6 inches. What is the area of the clock face? What do we know from this problem? Well, we know that the clock face is a circle. We know that the diameter is 6 inches. We know that we need to find the area. So first, let's draw a picture of the situation. So here's a circle. Draw yourself a circle. Okay, and we know that the diameter goes through the center of the circle from one side of the circle to the other. And we know that that diameter is 6 inches. Okay, and again, remember that we're trying to find the area, which is this space inside the circle. It's how much space the circle takes up. Well, we also know that the formula for the area of a circle is A equals pi r squared, or area equals pi times the radius squared. We also know that the diameter is twice the radius, or that a radius, which is what we need for our formula, is half of the diameter. So if the diameter is 6 inches, what would the radius be? Right, the radius is the diameter divided by 2, or half of the diameter. Since our diameter is 6 inches, then our radius is going to be 3 inches. Great work. Okay, so let's use our formula. We have A equals pi. Now we know the radius, because remember the entire diameter was 6 inches, so the radius is 3 inches. So we can substitute 3 in place of r. Okay, to simplify this a little bit, we know 3 squared means 3 times 3, which is 9. We're still using 3 and 1400ths as an approximation for pi. And so what's our last step to calculate the area? We're going to multiply these two numbers together. So go ahead and use your calculator if you'd like to, or work that out. I'll pause for just a second and then we can check our answers. Okay, so did you get 28 and 2600ths? hundredths square inches. All right, so the area of the clock face is 28 and 26 hundredths square inches. Great. Let's think about how we could find the area of a circle if we're given the circumference. Here's our next problem. There's a circular walking path in the city park. The path is 1/2 mile or 2,640 feet around. Rob wants to reseed the grass enclosed within the circular walking path. He needs to determine how many square feet he needs to reseed. Well, what do we know from the problem? Right, we know that the path forms a circle. We know that the distance around the path, which is the circumference, is 2,640 feet. Okay, so let's draw a picture. I have one here where we've got our circle. We know that the circumference, which is the distance around that circle, is 2,640 feet. And remember that we want the area, which is how much space that circle occupies. So what do we need to know if we're going to find the area? Remember the formula for area is pi r squared. So what do we need if we're going to determine the area? Right, we need the radius. We have to know what the radius is in order to find the area here. But we're given the circumference. So how can we find the radius if we've been given the circumference? Well, think back to a previous lesson and remember that circumference equals 2 pi r, or 2 times pi times the radius. We do know the circumference. We know that c, or the circumference, is 2,640. So we can substitute that in place of c. Now that we know that, we can solve for the radius. So in order to solve for the radius, we're going to need to get that r by itself, that radius by itself. Well, currently, r is being multiplied by 2 and by pi. So the opposite of multiplying by 2 and by pi is dividing by 2 and by pi. So we want to divide by 2 pi on both sides to get that r by itself. Now, 2,640 divided by 2 is 1,320. Feel free to use that calculator, folks. That's what it's there for. So 2,640 divided by 2 is where this 1,320 comes from, but I'm still dividing by pi. Okay, so 2,640 divided by 2 is 1,320, still divided by pi. And over here, when we did 2 pi r divided by 2 pi, leaves us with the radius. Okay, to finish this one out, we know that we are using 3 1400ths as an approximation for pi. So we want to put that last piece into our calculator and simplify in order to determine what the radius is. So take a second and do that if you haven't already. Okay, so hopefully when you put this into your calculator, or if you did the division by hand, you got 420 and 38 hundredths as the radius. Awesome, but have we actually solved the problem? What was all of that work for? Well, remember that we need the area. In order to find the area, we needed the radius. So we had to use what we were given, which was the circumference, in order to find the radius. Now that we know the radius, we can substitute that for r in our area formula. So let's do that now. We're going to leave pi. We're going to substitute the radius that we just found, which was 420 and 38 hundredths. And remember that that radius gets squared. Also remember that when you're squaring it, it means you're doing that number times itself. So 420 and 38 hundredths times 420 and 38 hundredths. So once you've squared that, hopefully using your calculator, Check and see if you got this same number. 176,719 and 34 hundredths. Now that's just what we got when we squared the radius. We still need to use 3 and 14 hundredths as an approximation for pi and multiply that approximation for pi times the number that we got when we squared the radius. Let me make sure I've written all that down correctly. Okay. Feel free to use your calculator here. Multiply those two numbers together. And you can double check with what I'm writing here. So what does this number mean? Oh, let me square feet there. What's that number mean? Right, so it means that Rob will need enough seed to cover 554,898 and 73 hundredths square feet of ground. That is a lot of seed. Okay, so we've thought about finding the area given the radius, thought about finding the area given the diameter, and we've thought about finding the area given the circumference. Now we're going to practice what we've learned. Okay, so let's think about this problem. Oops. Okay, there you go. A DVD has a radius of 6 centimeters. What is the area of the DVD? Well, what do we know? Right, we know the radius, and we're trying to find the area. We also know the area formula, so let's draw a picture. So here I've got a circle for my DVD. I've got the radius of 6 centimeters. And we're trying to find the area, which remember is all of this space inside the circle, the space that the circle takes up. Okay. So we need the area formula, which is what? Yep. Pi r squared, pi times the radius squared. Okay, and what are we substituting and what variable are we substituting it for? So since we need to find the area, we're not substituting for a, that's what we're trying to find. Not substituting for pi, but we do know that the radius is 6, and that gets squared. Okay, well, what does it mean if something is squared? Yeah, it's that number times itself. So 6 times 6 is 36. Okay, now what? Right, we need to substitute our approximation of pi, and we are using 3 and 14 hundredths as our approximation for pi. So the last step for this one is to multiply those two numbers together. Feel free to use your calculator, or you can work this one out by hand. I'll pause while you do that, and then we can check our answer. Okay, did you get 113 and 4 hundredths? Okay, so what's that mean? Right, it means that the area of the DVD is 113 and 4 hundredths square centimeters. Good work. Let's do another one. The most popular pizza at Pavone's Pizza is the 10-inch personal pizza with one topping. What is the area of a pizza with a diameter of 10 inches? Write down what you know and draw a picture, and I will pause while you do that. Okay, so what did you write down that you know? You know that the pizza has a 10-inch diameter. And so we can draw a circle to represent that. Here's my circle. Circular pizza, 10-inch diameter. Remember that a diameter goes from one side of the circle through the center to the other side. And we are trying to find the area, which is inside of the circle here. So how do we find the area? What's the formula? Okay, remember that the formula for the area of a circle is pi times the radius squared. Okay, so when we use this formula, it allows us to find the area if we know the radius. Do we know the radius? Well, we weren't given the radius in the problem. So how are we going to figure out the radius? Well, remember that the radius is half of the diameter. Radius is the diameter divided by 2, or half of the diameter. So if the diameter is 10 inches, the radius of this pizza is 5 inches. Good work. We've got a radius of 5 inches. So if this is the diameter, then this is the radius, and it's 5 inches. Okay, so now that we know the radius, we can find the area. Remember that we're trying to find A. I'll leave pi. What are we substituting in place of r? Right, that 5 inches for the radius that we just found. Remember that 5 squared means 5 times 5, which is 25. Okay. I'm going to pause for you to figure out what we'll substitute next. Okay, so remember that we're using 3 and 1400ths as an approximation for pi. And then our last step here is to multiply those two numbers together and simplify to find the area. Go ahead and do that now. Did you get 78 and 50 hundredths? Excuse me, 78 and 50 hundredths. So what does that mean? Right, it means that the 10-inch pizza has an area of 78 and 5/10 square inches. Good work. We've got one more. A circle has a circumference of 2 inches. What is the area of the circle? You try this one on your own, then we will work it together. I know you can do this one. I'm going to pause while you work on this one. Okay, so we know that the circumference is 2 inches. We know that the circumference is 2 times pi times the radius. And so we can use that to find the radius, because remember, if we're trying to find the area, the formula is pi radius squared. And so we need the radius, so we're going to use our circumference to find the radius. So we know that the circumference is 2. And we're going to solve for r, meaning we're going to get r by itself. Well, r is being multiplied by 2 and by pi. The opposite of multiplying by 2 pi is dividing by 2 pi. So I'm going to divide by 2 pi on both sides. Well, 2 divided by 2 is 1, and we still have divided by pi. And over here, that's equal to the radius. We are going to use 3 and 1400ths as our approximation of pi. So sticking that in my calculator and doing 1 divided by 3 and 1400ths, I get 32 hundredths as the approximation for my radius. Now that we know the radius, we can use the formula for the area of a circle, which is pi r squared. We're going to substitute that radius that we just found in place of r, which was 32 hundredths. Okay. Now remember that we're squaring that, which means we're multiplying that number times itself, which gives me, okay, and then we are going to multiply that times our approximation of pi, which is approximately 3 and 1400ths. So we're going to multiply those two numbers together. And I hope that you got 32 hundredths square inches. So the circle has an area of 32 hundredths square inches. Great work today, 7th grade. Remember that today we reviewed finding the area of a circle. You really did a great job. After the video, you will have some problems to practice on your own. I've got the independent practice here now that I will show you. It's on the screen for you. But you can also find it in the student practice for this lesson, which is posted on the website, www.tn.gov/education. Good luck on this and make sure that you do your best. All right, 7th grade. I enjoyed reviewing finding the area of a circle with you today. Thank you for inviting me into your home. I look forward to seeing you in our next lesson in Tennessee's At Home Learning series. Bye.